Go ahead and start. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It is 11:31 on October 11th. This is the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Legal and Justice Subcommittee. I'll start by beginning with the land acknowledgement statement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nuksak, Samish, and Semiahmoo people, who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Thank you. So we'll begin by calling this meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda this morning is going to be presented by Jake Webush and Bruce Benglup from Whatcom County District Court Probation. And they're going to be discussing an update on domestic violence offender treatment and programming. Take it away.
All right. Well, I'll start. Bruce, unless you want to kick us off.
Nope. That sounds great. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's good to see everyone. Yeah. So we DV treatment. What do we have here at Whatcom County? We have we're down, unfortunately, to one provider. Well, we have a second provider with Lummi Nation for clients out there, and as well, we now have Phoenix Counseling, who is just recently moved to town, and they have multiple branches out around the state, and with Relationship Resources recently closing, they were able to come in right about the time of Relationship Resources closing and absorb a lot of those clients. Unfortunately, they've also come on the contract with the county for the DV POTS program, which is the Domestic Violence Perpetrator for Opportunity Treatment Services. Many of you know this and have heard about this, but for those that don't, it is a service at District Court, a program that we are monitoring reimbursement for treatment services for indigent defendants that come through Whatcom County District Court, as well as the city of Bellingham. So for those individuals, we have, I believe, a total of 17 currently receiving funds that are attending treatment with Phoenix Counseling. We've had, I think, a total of 47 to date over the last 2 years come through that program. We've had some challenges with that program due to treatment provider availability. As many of you know, like I mentioned, 2 of those providers, the original 2, have closed, and we're now on our 3rd. And as a good provider, we're excited they're here. They seem to be very business oriented, as well as good with their treatment services. They also provide a Spanish speaking option. So we're excited about that. We're excited to see where that goes. We have seen that the financial aspect of providing that taking away that barrier is not the only thing that sometimes gets in the way of full compliance with these individuals. And because of that, Judge Anderson has started in District Court for our individuals there, a family justice court. And it's a review calendar held every 3 weeks for those individuals receiving the funds to not only have probation present, but the judicial officer to kind of enforce compliance and just see how things are going and hold them accountable from that judicial element as well. So we've seen some really good results there. Like I said, they're doing that every 3 weeks. If they're in full compliance, those folks can be continued 2 to 3 months and just check in. So we've had some graduations. We've had some really good outcomes there so far. That was started just this last, I believe, February. So again, that's with Judge Anderson and the District Court referrals. We also are continuing to provide here at District Court Probation the DV MRT option as well. I've mentioned it prior as well. It's a 24-step program. They go through a workbook. It's an alternative to the standard DV treatment. When we're utilizing that, we as probation officers, there's 5 of us who are trained to facilitate that program. And again, they work through the steps themselves and present on them. If they pass, they move on to the next one. So it's a great program. We utilize that when maybe the standard module didn't work very well, and they're back in front of us again. We also utilize that program perhaps when funding is not present, or if they're above the cutoff for indigency. As well, we use that sometimes when they have a plate full of different programs, alcohol, drug, mental health, other places they need to attend. So we offer them that program, which we can get them in the door quickly and provide that at obviously very low barriers. So we're excited. We enjoy that program. It's probably my highlight of my week. I get to facilitate one of those groups. We also just started for non-intimate partner assault cases, anger management program, also with the MRT heading. It's an 8-week program, and it's free of cost to clients that have a referral to district court probation, regardless of what court they're coming from. We just didn't see a big anger management programs out in the community. There's quite a gap there. A lot of people are utilizing online resources, which we just didn't trust or know much about. And so we're providing this. Again, it's an 8-week program that they work through and do a similar workbook and present on those steps. So we started that 2 weeks ago. Again, it's exciting. And so, yeah, those are kind of where we're at, I guess, a little bit with the DV providers here in Whatcom County and the programs. Any questions about those?
Arlene?
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about the offender program, just a little bit of content so we can get an idea of what the approach is? Because this is a very difficult set of patterns to change.
Mhm. Are you talking about with the MRT or so with the DV
I mean, I
treatment?
don't know what
Yeah.
MRT means.
Sure. Okay. Let me back up. So if they're required to get a domestic violence evaluation from the court, they go to a provider, Phoenix Counseling being one of those, and they get evaluated. And there's 4 levels of treatment. Well, actually there's 5. There's a level 0, which would mean you're not going to be needing services, or 1 through 4. So 1 would be 26 weeks. And then it goes all the way up to a year and a half of treatment. And they're working on addressing the behaviors that got them there, breaking down learned behavior and addressing all of those. They have to show progress throughout those programs to be able to continue. And the providers have to provide that as well to the state to show that progress has been made, kind of report cards on each client. And in the DVMRT, that's a domestic violence moral recognition therapy there. And we're addressing beliefs, not emotions, but beliefs and actions. And so breaking down those barriers again about beliefs, about trust issues, about how we're hurting others, and hopefully, establishing new actions going forward. So, if they're continuing to point fingers and not accept responsibility, they're not moving forward. So it's really a great way that we as facilitators can maintain that, but also they hold one another accountable, because they start at 1, sometimes somebody's at 20, step 20, somebody new's coming in. So they're at different phases, and there's a lot of accountability there amongst the defendants. So it's a really neat program to see. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, you did, Jake.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
because the devil's in the details, right?
Mhm.
The ability to change a person's beliefs is not a simple thing and can
Right.
only happen over time.
Yeah.
And you're describing pretty timely system. So I'm encouraged. It sounds good.
Yeah, and I can only speak for when we have them in front of us, right? I don't know what they're doing outside of us all the time, and after they graduate, I can't speak for that, but we do see that change, and it's inspiring to see that. And we wouldn't continue to do these programs if we didn't see that. Again, I can't guarantee what they do outside of here, but it's really neat to see. So yeah.
Thank you. I think we have Jackie and then
Sure.
Stephen.
Thank you, Jake. That's really great to hear. And Arlene, that was a great question. It really gave some valuable information about the details of the program. I think it's just really exciting that this is finally happening. Can you hear me? Because
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
I've
Turn
had
it up just a
trouble
little.
with my.
I'm gonna turn you up just a little bit though.
Oh,
Okay, there you go. You're good.
okay, all right. Anyway, I just think it's really exciting that this has finally come about, and I know you guys have been working on this forever. You and
Yeah.
Bruce. So I'm really glad to hear that it's come about. I just had a question that's slightly off track, but I just wondered, do you think Phoenix has any plans to bring in their SUD services into this community as well? Are they
Yeah.
currently licensed to do that in Whatcom County?
I think they are off very close, but I also know, she mentioned that prior to even coming. I get. However, I know she's very, very busy. Like starting this branch here, she has a place in the towers, Bellingham Towers. But I think she's lost a few staff, so she's not only transitioning this new branch, but also running a lot of the groups. And is just, I think that's in her future. I don't know the time frame for that.
And who is the her? Could you just tell me who?
I'm sorry, Brandy McBride is the owner of Phoenix Council.
Okay, it used to be a different lady, so good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jake.
You bet. Yep.
And Bruce, great job, you guys.
Stephen?
Jake, thank you for the presentation. I know Bruce has been really careful about this in the past. I'm going to ask in a roundabout way about your statement that we can't tell what they're doing outside of the class. And so since we're sort of charged with evidence-based things, I'm interested in whether we're tracking outcomes and later charges, including fairly far down the road, in new relationships or otherwise.
Sure.
And I'm also interested in what evidence base there is for the POTS curriculum and current research on MRT results. I remember a couple of years ago, Bruce distributed some information on MRT that looked promising. I'm just wondering what data shows elsewhere that might bear that out, what the POTS curriculum looks like, and how we're tracking results for people who go through these programs.
Sure. Bruce, you want to start? You want me? Go ahead.
What if how about if I start on this one?
Yep.
So, to give you the brief history, the reason we even went down the path of offering the domestic violence moral recognition therapy program was because we were getting hearing frustration from prosecutors and defense attorneys of lack of resources available, and so we listened to that, and that's what got us started there. This program is being implemented in many probation departments across Washington State. I don't know about other states, and it was to fill a need that wasn't being met because of the lack of availability of domestic violence treatment. It's evidence-based to reduce recidivism, and we looked into that at the time. I believe the research still bears that out. But I wanted to talk about, I think what you were asking about is local statistics and local numbers and trends. And we have information, but the concern I have is that I don't know that we've been doing it long enough to be able to see serious trends and the other concern I have is I don't know that we're ever going to have a sample size that is where we can draw any serious conclusions based on what we're seeing. I mean, we can gather data, but I think we have to rely on more national studies of the DVMRT program for us to know that this is an evidence-based program. And everybody who facilitates these groups, they've been through the training. I think it's a 5-day training. It's a pretty intense training. So I don't know if this is really answering your question or not, but concerns I have is just as our sample size is so small, we haven't been doing it long enough to really, I don't know that we can draw anything from what we have yet. Did I get even close to answering your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. As you can imagine, this is one of, in our communications with the community and within the task force, this is the kind of question that comes up is are we doing enough, and is what we're doing effective? So it sounds as if you have some evidence base for utilizing MRT programs. Would it be possible for you to distribute some of that research to Jill and then out to the committee so that we're all a little better informed if we face questions on that?
Yeah, honestly, I have to dig it out to be honest. I mean, I don't know that I've got it at my fingertips, but that is something Jake and I could work on.
Certainly.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, and I'm not talking about having it by the end of the week necessarily, but it does seem like something that would be useful to have in our hands.
Yeah.
You
And
know
then-
what? When you don't have a scientific study, it is acceptable to use subjective reports. And especially when the statistics are smaller, we have had subjective reports from Lead and Grace. I don't know how scientific the study is, but the reports are positive. So you can at least say that.
Sure.
And I think Arlene's point helps clarify my question. There are sort of, in my mind, two prongs of evidence based. One is there a history, overall that shows effectiveness of a certain practice? And there does seem to be national research that supports MRT. So that's that one prong. Then there's the prong is it being effective in the way we're using it? And that's more localized data, or maybe there's national data on that also. And I understand the small sample issue, but we'd also take anything, because if it's not evidence-based, it could be a best practice or a promising practice because we see indications of success from it. So I'm trying to hone in on data and a lot of our issues here, and whatever you and Jake, Bruce could give us would be useful. I'd appreciate that.
So one thing I don't know if it was mentioned is that, so there is no cost to the client to participate in this program. And we didn't get any ask for or get any additional funding to be able to offer this program. We just were hearing that there's a need, and we were able to do some restructuring within the department. And so there was no additional staff hired or anything like that. The only expense to the county has been the cost of training the staff members to be qualified to provide the service, and then the cost of the actual workbooks for the defendant. So we've been able to implement this with a pretty low financial impact to the county, and we do not charge the clients at all. And so in an effort to try to break down the barriers of money and everything else that they're already facing, we thought that we're able to do that, and we have been. Jake, did you have anything you wanted to add to this, these questions?
I don't think so, Bruce. Thank you.
So my apologies to Maya, but that's the first part of my question. The second had to do with what we know about the POTS curriculum and research base or experiential base for that.
Well, we defer to the state to monitor that. It's in our contract, is, we don't get into auditing the provider. The provider is already held accountable by the state, and many of you might know Amy Roberts. She, I think, maybe has presented to similar groups here, and so she manages that. The state, on the state level, they revised the RCWs many years ago and came up with this current structure of the 4 levels. And so I don't know, the research has been done there. I don't believe it's been compared to MRT locally either. But I would say that they've made a lot of steps in the right direction in the last 5 or 6 years to modify that. And so.
Yeah, I remember Amy's presentations. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you. Maya?
I just wanted to let everyone know that the Defender's Office, and I organized a training by Jake and Judge Anderson for the Defender's Office and the prosecutors. Was it last week? Maybe the week before. And so all of this was sort of explained in detail with the idea that should hopefully encourage prosecutors to make offers to reduce felony domestic violence offenses so that they can be placed into the supervision, this review calendar that Judge Anderson is running, and get access to treatment. Often domestic violence charges in Superior Court they don't have the same kind of robust supervision, I don't think, from DOC that they do necessarily through our district court probation. So the trade-off being, the state reducing a more serious offense to a misdemeanor with more attention being paid with the Family Justice Court. So we have, that was like last week, and I not everybody was there from every office, but Eric Ritchie and Eric Sigmar were there and said that they would go back to their staff meeting and encourage their attorneys to look at this as an option. And it's certainly something the defense will be asking for. So it's just, we're trying to use it. Thanks.
Thank you, Maya. I have about 4 questions here, so
Oh boy.
my apologies. One, kind of going back onto Stephen's statistic question, and this is something you guys can get to us at a later date. But if we could look at least for this program specifically with the county, how many have been assigned to the DVMRT and how many were successfully completed, and then how many were revoked?
We're talking about DVMRT specifically?
Like they were assigned to this program as part of a sentencing for a domestic violence charge, and how many successfully completed the DVMRT and how many were revoked or didn't finish it satisfactory.
Yeah, that shouldn't be hard.
Okay. Next question. How many probation officers are currently trained in DVMRT?
We have 5 in DVMRT, and we have 4 in standard MRT, and 2 of us in anger MRT. So we currently are running 2 groups of DVMRT, 1 standard MRT, and 1 anger. So
Is that enough?
right now, yes, we have the ability to expand and are willing.
Okay. That kind of brings me into legislative funding and needs. We don't want to just do presentations without action. So if there needs to be more funding for the defendants that can't afford DV treatment, if there needs to be more funding for probation to get the training or to have the books available to these individuals, I think it's a great point that Maya brought up, that we might be more successful with some of the amended charges. So anything that you think that we need to assist on this, please let us know.
Thank you.
And then I know a lot of times defendants are working during the day or they can't make it to probation on certain times for these treatment program opportunities. Is this option available on weekends or evenings, or is that out of the question?
Right now for DVMRT, it's held via Zoom currently, and it's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it does not seem to be a barrier. They request like an hour off of work once a week, something along those lines. And I will say Zoom is not perfect, but it does actually provide them with an opportunity to speak without like that intimidation from people around you. You know, you're sitting by yourself and you might be a little more free to speak. So yes, that accountability is a little bit different, but you also see this different element of people opening up a little easier. So I'll put that out there. Yes, they are currently via Zoom. And we'd be willing, the anger group, actually, we started at noon on the lunch hour to see if that's going to work. We're flexible with those. We have run groups later in the afternoon, evening for previous groups that we've done over the years. But as far as weekends, probably not. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Oh, great. Is there any other questions for Jake or Bruce on this topic? All right, thank you so much both for your presentation, but Bruce isn't going to get off the hook, so. So Ernest Friesen did a presentation in the National Institute of Court Management and discussed the 8 purposes of courts. 2 of those purposes discussed were to provide a final resolution to legal solutions so people can move on with their lives. That applies to defendants, victims, witnesses, and cases shouldn't be litigated over long periods. Second was to appear to do justice as people rely on what courts will do. If cases go on too long, people lose confidence in the court system. Unfortunately, the pandemic has set everything back, including trials. I can speak on behalf of the small cities. I can tell you trials are happening and record numbers. I haven't set as many trials as recently. I currently have 4 set. I usually have 1 trial a year. We just had a trial last week. I have another one scheduled for Monday. I have another one possibly going at the end of the month. I've got one scheduled for December 1st. Everson just had a trial. Sumas is having their first trial that they've had in a long time. And that's going to actually happen the same week as my trial. So we're doing a lot of juggling here on the small cities. I don't know if Darlene wants to chime in. I didn't warn her ahead of time. But Bruce is willing to speak about district court and what the status is. And I'll let you kick it off, Bruce.
All right, thank you. So first thing I want to do is apologize to anybody who was just in the Whatcom County Council. I think it's called the Justice and Public Safety Committee, because I'm about to give the exact same presentation because they had the same. Well, anyway, you're getting the same presentation they just got. It was just happened to be coincidentally 2 jury trial kinds of presentations on the same day within about an hour and a half of each other. So what I thought I would talk about was start with talking about jury coordination activities. It's the first part. The second would be to give you an update on where we're at specifically with district court. So with the jury coordination, the way this works, and I apologize for any of you who've heard all this before, but jury coordination is a service that is housed in district court, and it provides jurors for district court, superior court, and the city of Bellingham.
And
pardon?
And us.
Right, except we don't do the jury coordination part. We provide the smaller cities with, I think, lists, maybe labels. I mean, but the actual summonsing and whatnot for district superior in Bellingham, we do that out of district court. And so we've had a lot of changes and a lot of adapting to do since the onset of the pandemic. But just so that you know how jury coordination works is that we do not find out until 3 or maybe 4 o'clock, sometimes later on a particular day, that we are going to need to have jurors the next day for a trial. So our lead time on being prepared and ready to call in jurors and get them properly oriented and checked in and logged into the database, we get, in terms of working hours, we get an hour or 2. Sometimes we're really lucky. We may find out earlier in the afternoon of the day before, but our lead time is very short. So that means that jury coordination services has to be up and running at 100% every single day, day after day, week after week. And I know that I've used this example of jury coordination is like Amazon Prime. You buy something and you expect it to show up the next day. It's the same thing for jury coordination. Court calls us and says, and we've taken these calls late in the afternoon. We've had them calls at home to the jury coordinator in the evening. They need a jury trial for tomorrow. And it's the same thing with Netflix. You click the button, you expect your movie to pop up or your TV show. It's the same thing with jury coordination services. So throughout the entire pandemic, we put in more staff resources and work and expense to maintaining this function throughout the pandemic than we did pre-pandemic. Because every time the Supreme Court or somebody else would say, we're going to pause jury trials, by the time they made that decision, we'd already sent the summonses out. And so we already had all these folks in the queue. They're calling us. They're concerned about their health, their safety. And so for us, jury coordination became more difficult throughout the pandemic and more time consuming. It's the jury, we have one jury coordinator for the county, but it's probably the most cross-trained position we have in district court, because when we get a call at 3 or 4 in the afternoon for the next day, we don't have the option of saying, well, we'll deal with this next week or in a couple of days. We got to be ready to go and get the notices out and properly to the prospective jurors. So that's the kind of service that it is. It's just the task. That's the way the task is managed, and it's just the way it is. We've tried other things, but the reality is we don't get confirmation until the very last minute on pretty much nearly every single trial that ends up going. So we have, throughout the pandemic, we've done things like temperature checks. We've done health questionnaires. We've done social distancing in the county council chambers for the jury orientation. And the council chambers were also used by Superior Court for jury selection, and they had done some social distancing. And we had, masks, hand sanitizer, gloves, the whole bit. We've dialed that back as the pandemic has itself sort of dialed back a little bit. But throughout the pandemic, we did not run many trials. We did a lot of preparation, a lot of training, hundreds of phone calls from prospective jurors concerned. We mailed out thousands and thousands of summons, but the reality was we didn't run very many trials at all throughout most of the pandemic. We did have to increase our jury summons mailing, which are sent out weekly, from 600 pre-pandemic to 800 right now. And that kind of seems to be where that balancing point is for us to make sure we're going to have enough individuals willing, able, and ready to serve on juries and will show up. And so we continue to get a lot of requests to be excused or exempted from jury service because of health concerns that they have, pandemic related. We've always had health issues that have kept some people from being able to serve, but we're still seeing the pandemic related complications with that. And so it's very routine for us. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like the nature of the last minute finding out whether we're having a jury trial or not is any more of a burden than any other task that we complete in the court system. It's just the way it works. We're set up for it. We're structured. We've got staff trained and cross-trained to do that. It's just the way that it's the nature of the way that task has to be managed. So throughout the pandemic, district court ran very, very few trials. Since things have progressed a little bit and the pandemic has dialed back a little bit, we have probably over the course of this year run about a dozen trials. We pulled in jurors for about a dozen, maybe 13 trials for Superior Court. And I believe the city of Bellingham, and Darlene may be able to comment specifically on this, but I believe the city of Bellingham ran one jury trial. So as our status is right now with jury trials in district court, and I can't comment on other courts, we have courtrooms, we have judges, we have time, we have staff resources to run more trials. We are still not running. We didn't see this huge flood of jury trials that we were expecting, that we were told would be coming our way. We don't. So in the sense of, are we prepared? Are there available jury trial days and times available? Are there judges available? Are all the resources there? We don't have a backlog in that sense. Most weeks we still don't have trials. Sometimes we get a little flurry of them, and then we may not see one for weeks, if not longer. So from the perspective of, and I'm speaking only for district court here, from the perspective of district court, we don't really have a backlog of trials. We've got them scheduled out, and then the parties to a case may choose or request that a case be trial be continued. But we could run trials, and the demand for trials is not there the way we had anticipated. So I see that Darlene just popped in with camera. Darlene, did you want to make a comment? And then I'll just open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Bruce is correct. We just recently started, we had opened our jury trials this summer, but just began actually have them going. We currently have 23 jury trials set and pending. 2 of them are from 2019, 9 of them are from 2020, 7 are from 2021, and then we have 5 set so far from this year. So we do have a backlog, but it's not because we're not doing jury trials. What tends to happen is that they're set, and many of these trials resolve before we go to a jury trial. But that's where the court is now, and that count was as of yesterday. So that's where the city of Bellingham is with its jury trials. And as Bruce said, we use district court probation. District court is the one that gets our juries together and brings them to us, and just very, very helpful. And we're one of those courts that we often don't know until Monday afternoon before trial if the case is actually going to go. So the jury coordinator has to get everything ready as if it was going to go. And then, for instance, as yesterday, we had a trial where the attorneys assured us it was going to trial. We have a judge that wasn't here, so we lined up a pro tem, which is basically a substitute judge. And then at the last minute yesterday afternoon, it was settled. So that happens quite frequently. But from my perspective, 23 jury trials pending is not what I'd call an overload or a backlog. It's pretty traditional of what we've run. And so while we also expected quite a backlog, it doesn't seem like it's really materialized. Our biggest backlog is on warrants. We had, during the pandemic, the Supreme Court ordered that warrants only be activated if it was a extreme concern to the community. And so at last count, we had 466 warrants that were authorized but not ordered. And so that's a backlog that we're working through. So that's a much bigger backlog for us than the jury trial situation. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Darlene. Jackie?
Yeah, Bruce, I just had a question. I'm kind of a neophyte in this particular area, right? I know probably the least about court proceedings of anybody in the Zoom room. So I was just wondering though, I guess remote court might be like not really available or illegal or something. I'm just wondering, because it sounds like it didn't happen during the pandemic, and now that the pandemic is pretty much over, at least the crisis is over. Is it available? Can it be available? Would it speed things up? Does it speed things up? I'm really unknowledgeable about this area, ignorant. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me comment about district court. And so we have had or provided the opportunity for remote appearance for our hearings. I think all of them now for quite some time. I'm thinking probably, 2 years, maybe not quite that long. So if we have a defendant or an attorney that would like to appear for any court hearing remotely, it is very easy for them to do so. And we have a lot of people who take advantage of that. We had more when the pandemic was more active. And we had some hearings that were only done remotely. We went through a period of time where all infractions could only be heard remotely. with very, very few exceptions. And that was when we were trying to cut down on the foot traffic coming in to the courthouse and coming up to the 4th floor where district court is housed. We don't have any mandatory remote hearings, but we have it available for all hearings at this point, unless someone in the system pulls that hearing and says, wait a minute, this is not appropriate for this client or for this to be a remote hearing. We have not done remote jury trials. And that was a decision made by the judges in district court that was just not something we were going to try and effectively pull off. We did have a lot of social distancing earlier on, where our entire gallery was taken up by jurors, and we would have YouTube early on, but also Zoom availability for the public to tune in and watch jury trials. Or any hearing, you can still do it now. It's on our website. Anybody who wants to sit in and watch a hearing of any type can just sit at their desk and do that. So does that kind of answer what you were asking?
Yeah, I know Stephen wants to talk too, but just a follow-up question or two. So can you talk a little bit about the judge's sentiments about not having more jury trials? I'm just, again, totally ignorant about kind of these proceedings. So what's their sentiment about why jury trials cannot be held remotely?
You know, I don't know that I can comment on that. I don't feel knowledgeable enough in that or what they might be thinking about that to comment.
Okay, all right. Okay, so and then is it your sentiment then that it's more of a workforce issue why things are clogged at this point, that you just have too many backed up from before and now there's just not enough workforce to process jury trials? I'm just curious again.
Well, it isn't a workforce issue from the district court perspective. As I think I'd mentioned, we've got courtrooms, we have days, times, we have judges, we have staff, we've got the technology, we have everything we need to run jury trials. And we have vacant. I don't think this week we had any trials. I'm not sure if we had any the week before. It's too early to know about next week, but we have plenty of availability of everything that district court needs to be able to operate a jury trial. What I'm not qualified to comment about is other participants or players within the law and justice system and their resources. And I'm thinking primarily prosecution, defense. That I can't comment on because I don't have enough personal knowledge of that. But in terms of the district court perspective, we're available and able to run jury trials and could run a lot more than we are currently.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I think Maya might actually be able to respond to the question that you had, Jackie. I know our judge said that defense and prosecution have the right to confront witnesses in person. So there was definitely some concerns due to some legal requirements for doing jury trials remotely. I don't know that that would happen, but Maya, did you have any information on that?
I mean, I just think there's like a huge litany of reasons why there shouldn't be remote jury trials. I don't know that this is really the time to go down that discussion, but I mean, it's not for lack of consideration, I'll say that, but I think it's it's totally inappropriate, and I don't think that the court would do it. And I don't think district court is really laboring under a backlog. Bruce, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I just don't think that that's the case. I think it's in Superior Court where the filings have been up. District court hasn't had the same. They're different beasts, and I just don't think that there's problems in district court that I hear about.
Thank you. Stephen?
Bruce and Darlene, thank you for that information. That really helps me to see that part of the picture. I was going exactly where Maya went, and so I'll just throw out my question, and Maya may be the best responder. I'm trying to put the picture of district court and municipal court together with our sense that the jail is packed with pretrial people who obviously have more serious offenses, so it's likely they're Superior Court. Excuse me. And Maya, I wonder if you could explain to us why we could have a flow in district and municipal courts and why we don't seem to have much going on trial-wise or otherwise in Superior Court. Where are the bottlenecks there that you could
This is
identify?
such a huge question, and there's so many people talking and thinking about this right now. Like, I can just try to touch on it. I mean, a teeny bit, I guess. I would say that the cases, the folks that are, I'm like looking at Wendy's jail aging report, you know, like the folks that are in for a long time have really complicated cases that require a lot of investigation and legal work. There's quite a number of them that are awaiting restoration services at Western State Hospital, where they're being told it'll be 8 months before they get a bed date. I mean, some of these people just have really serious, I mean, and I'm looking at the aging report, it's like, so, you know, the shutdown, sure, the shutdown's over, but in the case that originated in 2020, for instance, there was the whole time when offices were shut down, when our investigators weren't going into the field. Like, now they are. Now they're going into the field. Now they're doing investigation. Now they're reaching out to witnesses and victims and trying to get interviews done, but they're all happening at the same time. It's like this whole 1.5 years of cases that could not get work done. There wasn't the ability to do the investigation and work that was needed to prepare those cases, are just piling and piling and piling. And the state keeps filing charges and people keep getting arrested. But so there's just, it's just like, where is the bottleneck? The whole system is the bottleneck, right? Like, it's like, we are making progress and chiseling through it. And we are trying to come up with like innovative ways to deal with things like the direct filing that we just met with the prosecutors again. It might have been last week or the week before. And we have an agreement with them that they're going to take some felony referrals they're receiving and file them as misdemeanors in district court, with the caveat that the case has to be resolved either by plea or trial within 6 months, or it's refiled in Superior Court as a felony. So that's going to help, maybe, if they use it. I don't know. I get a couple emails a week that here's a case we're doing it with, but I don't know what the numbers will look like. Like, that may divert some low-level felonies out of Superior Court into district court, where they can be resolved by trial or plea, and alleviate some of that ongoing piling on that's happening. And the idea of sending some of these maybe assault twos, DVs, or other DV cases down to district court for family justice court. But these are all things like we've literally just been hammering out in the last few weeks. So I don't know when, you know, and if they'll be utilized, and if they are, when an impact will actually show up on the numbers of new cases coming in. You know, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just going to take time, and it takes resources. And on top of all of that, then it's like, there's so many things. It's like body cam. Let's talk about that. Last year in 2021, I think there were something like 400 hours of body cam footage received by our office. This year, at the end of August, we'd received 1,200 hours. Okay. So all these agencies that are now have body cam, great, excellent. That's for furthering justice, a wonderful thing. We are ethically obligated to watch all of it and look at it. And that changes the work. So it's like, okay, so we got the same number of lawyers with backlog, with whole new kinds of evidence coming in. Like, I don't know, this is not I can't be very concise, and I feel like I'm missing 1,000 things. And so, but those are some problems.
Well, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Maya, I find that really helpful too, just that you described some of them, and maybe over time we can hear about more of them. Thanks.
Thank you, Maya. Darlene?
I was just going to say, more than the jury trial backup, I think what we have noticed, I mentioned that we have 466 held warrants that haven't been ordered, though authorized. This year, we're up 1,000 already warrants that have been issued. And we had really got that going down, but what's happened is that many of the misdemeanors, although they're not felonies, they're serious ones with domestic violence or drinking and driving, drugs and driving. What's happening is because they're not staying in custody long enough to be at an in-custody hearing, those people are just being let go. And so when they're let go, they don't appear for their court hearings. And so what's happening to us is we used to have a stack of about 12 to 16 inches of in-custody hearings. We now have probably 6 to 8 feet wide of files that are in custody, defendants that were in custody, but now they may have 9 cases, 12 cases. The number of cases that they're accumulating because of this revolving door that we can't even get a hearing in before the jail releases them. They're just stacking up all these warrants. And our in-custody calendars that used to take maybe 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes they're running 2.5 hours. And these people are just gathering all of these warrants. So even though it sounds like it's a great idea that they're not keeping these people, if they're not kept to get their first initial hearing, this is what's happening. Not only is it really hard for the courts to process all of this, but it's really a mess for defendants because they don't get their cases resolved. And then there's a whole bunch more before we even get them to court. So I would say for our court anyway, that's been one of the hardest things with not being able to have people at least heard before they're released.
Thank you, Darlene. Stephen?
I apologize for this, but I can't help but put one of my old hats back on and ask, does this mean that all civil litigation is just years down the road? Is civil litigation not happening because we have all these things we're working through on criminal trials?
I'll say I've heard that. I mean, there's judges available to do those trials. I think it's too bad there's no one from Superior Court here. But they are reluctant to like schedule them to trail criminal trials, which have priority if the person's in custody. You know, they're like, well, there's all these experts and there's so many witnesses involved in a civil trial. Like, we don't want to book it to trail a criminal trial because then they coordinate all of this and then it gets bumped. And so I don't know how, I mean, I have no idea how they're organizing or not organizing that. Like, I don't know if they have the capacity to devote a Superior Court judge to handle that, or I don't know. But yes, I think that is true. They are getting delayed, but I don't really understand why.
You know, I can comment on district court. I don't think that's the case for us. We this year ran well, first off, I can tell you we rarely run civil jury trials in district court. It happens, but it doesn't happen a lot. And this year, you know, I can't remember, it was over the course of the summer, we ran a civil trial. It was a 5-day trial, which is long for district court. But we were able to do it. And so I don't think that we're seeing that same kind of dynamic in district court that Superior Court is that Maya had just mentioned.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all the comments, and Maya, I appreciate you chiming in with as much information as you can provide, but I do know that it's a huge facet of all different avenues that are causing some of this. It's not just one thing. I can say that because we're so lucky in Blaine that we have Wednesday morning court, which happens to fall in the status hearings for Superior Court. Recently, I've had a couple attorneys, defense counsel, that have sent us emails during court saying, we're running late, we won't be there. We don't have the option to just continue our cases anymore if they're past 2 years old. We actually have to stay and give a good reason on why it can be continued if the case is older than a certain amount. When I talked to Sandra Keeley at Superior Court, she said, we will make an exception to get some people bumped if they have to be in Blaine. But that doesn't mean they're not going to have to still be heard. We'll just move them up on the calendar if possible. We can't guarantee everything, but they're going to coordinate with us. But she said we need to know why these are being continued out. We're not just going to grant a continuous, especially if they're that old. Now, Dave Reynolds isn't here. Other members from Superior Court aren't here. I can't represent Superior Court. I can just say that I think we're all doing the best we can with what we've got. Jackie?
Yeah, two things. I think there's a subtle irony here in that we have difficulty from the behavioral health side with engaging people if they don't reach that initial court hearing either, or in what we're calling unanticipated releases. So there seem to be a lot of those. And then the other piece is I was just wondering, does it make sense for us to invite somebody from Superior Court to come and talk about this same issue at the next meeting?
I actually think Jill and I were discussing that it might actually be at the next task force, that there might be somebody. I think we did invite, we just didn't get a response back, but I do know that they're very, very busy. Jill, can you comment on that?
Yes, you're correct. This is an agenda item for the full task force next week as well.
Thank you.
And
Are there-
Raylene, I think, just to follow up on Jill's comment, I think Dave Reynolds is going to be reporting for Superior Court. I don't think Judge Freeman is able to be there. He's going to be in trial. So we won't have a judicial officer, but we will have Dave.
I'm certain he will give you guys a bunch of information. I may or may not be there, as I have a trial scheduled on Monday. And we've found hiccups in our system as well. I've had 3 jurors call out. I had one tell me that they were summoned for Superior Court at the same time as Blaine. I've got staff out sick, so I'm on my own. I've got witness unavailability. So I'll find out tomorrow if I have a trial or not on Monday, or if I'm going to be able to go. But you know, this is how it works. We do the best we can. Is there any other comments on trial status? Other business, we are almost out of time. I was gonna have Jill put up a screen, but I think I'll have her post that, just email. There was a request from Marty, I believe, in reference to some of the things that we might be able to assist with on the Legal and Justice Subcommittee. So just a homework assignment on looking at it. If there's any thoughts or ideas, this might be an agenda item for future meetings. So she might send that out to you guys with a request to look at that. Is there any other business? Okay, is there any public comment?
We have 2 people attending remotely. If either of you would like to speak to the committee, please virtually raise your hand. And if there is anyone attending in our conference room, please unmute and you may speak to the committee. And no hands are raised.
Excellent. Just a side note, I also wanted to really thank Darlene for bringing up the warrant issues, because that is something that we're also facing. And the warrants before that we had before the pandemic were more minor and usually transient population. The warrants we're seeing now, for at least the small cities that I've noticed, are DUIs, operating a vehicle without ignition interlock. I've got one that's scheduled for court. She's now got three charges. 2 of them are on warrant status for the same thing. There's domestic violence charges. It's a revolving door, and these are kind of serious, scary offenses to have that revolving door out there. So definitely something we want to keep in mind. And thank you, everybody, for participating in today's meeting, and we'll see you at the next one.